This NASCAR season might just be the greatest season of all time. Like ever.
I get the feeling we're going to be playing that clip quite a bit here on Prime Sports NASCAR. After 2 weeks, the Cup Series has seen something happen that they haven't seen occur since the early days of Cup Series inception, which basically means it's never happened before. And that is the season has started, Eric. The first two races with brand new Cup Series winners. It was McDowell in Daytona. It's Bell in Daytona. The parity we like, no question, but the way we got the parity, that's a different story.
Yeah, it's been a wild season so far, and it's first since 1950 and 49 obviously happened, the first year of NASCAR and the second year of NASCAR. So, as you said, it's pretty much never happened. The only reason it happened then is you didn't have a lot of drivers that have won at that point. So, 0 for 357 McDowell and 0 for 38 Bell. And I think, and we'll talk on Wednesday's show, that I think you can see it again this weekend in Homestead to go 3 for 3. There's a couple of drivers I think you could watch for. But, weird innings. I mean, you had Keselowski and Logano wrecking in Daytona from the lead in the 500. And then yesterday, Logano just needed one more lap of caution, and they would have been a side-by-side finish at the end between him and Bell. You can make a strong case. Logano could be 2 for 2 right now, or even someone like Denny Hamlin or Chase Elliott. If a caution flag that I'm sure we'll talk about in a minute doesn't fly, he wins that race. And if the caution flies just a little bit later in the 500, he could be 2 for 2. Instead, we get 2 new winners, and here we go with the potential for a third on Sunday.
Yeah, and as we mentioned, it's not about having parity in the sport, which we like. It's just we don't really want to see these races manipulated the way they've been the last couple of weeks. Look, the end of the race was definitely more intriguing, no question, but you have to judge the race on not expecting something crazy to happen, which took place over the last 15 laps. If they did not pull the caution flag out, chances are Chase Elliott is going to dominate from start to finish again. He had led, 44 the first 55 laps. Then the caution comes out. And, we can get into the Logano thing. But the bottom line was, without the caution, Chase Elliott's going to win this race. He's going to win this race going away. He was the heavy favorite of the race. He's been the dominant road course racer. So I know there's going to be a decision made on whether to bring back a Daytona road course. And I don't know. I mean, I honestly don't want to see it. I just, for 80% of the race, when you see the same 5 or 6 cars up front and the same 6 or 7 between 10 and 20 and the same, it's just that there's no movement unless you get some weird caution late in the race. And I don't think you can't count on that. So unless they do something else, unless they think with the new car next year, that's going to matter. I don't know, but I mean, I was bored for most of the race.
Yeah, that race was pretty predictable, and these drivers talked about it afterwards, that Chase Elliott's the class of the field. He's the best road course driver. It showed yesterday again. The Gibbs cars overall have the best cars. I can only imagine if Elliott drove a Gibbs car on a road course. And the next is probably Logano, but it's not really that close. It's those two those two groups, being Elliott and Joe Gibbs Racing, have separated themselves from everybody else, and they all talked about that after the race, and they all said that without practice, it's going to be hard to catch them. Yes, we got a couple new road courses this year that you will have practice on, but it's just that they're new. Those guys are still going to have an advantage, and it's hard to catch them without track time. Hamlin feels like he's getting close, but he drives for Gibbs. And at one point, I even tweeted earlier in the race, you're going to have the Gibbs cars, Elliott and Allmendinger, all running right up there up front, and sure enough, there they were. And like you said, it's going to take a fluke caution, and even the fluke cautions, do you really want to see that? Do you really want to see something manipulated in the end that ruins everything you watched before that point?
It didn't even make any sense, the caution that came out. Why, when there's there's a little bit of rain. It's almost like Pocono. All right, there's a little bit of rain on the track, but there's a lot of dryness on the track.
Yep.
And then they stopped the race, and then it just seemed like things were happening that we had never seen before.
Yeah, and I don't know why they even have that rule in place. Like IndyCar and IMSA run a lot of road courses, and they don't. It's strategy. It's hey, it starts raining. Do you want to go to the wet tires, which are going to be slower on a drier track naturally, or do you stay on slicks, which could in turn be slower if it gets too wet? And it's a strategy. Who goes to what tire when?
Yeah.
And it's a game. Let it naturally play out instead
Yes.
of throwing a caution. I'm
Sure.
like, what's this? This doesn't make any sense. And some of the drivers you could tell maybe are making the PR like, oh, it was getting pretty wet there, but the telling sign is I've got the list right here. We've got 35 drivers are running at the finish. Not one of them put wet tires on. So what's that tell you? They all were good with the track being dry.
Yeah.
Didn't need the caution. So if I'm Chase Elliott, I'm pissed right now. He took a win away from me. And granted, Christopher Bell was right there. He came back and won. And nothing against Logano. I'm glad Bell at least somebody of that top 5 group rebounded to win, because if not, you just handed a win to somebody, and it'd show you that why pit in the end. We talk about this a lot on this show. When a caution comes out late in the race, why pit? It seems more often times than not that if you don't pit, those guys end up winning. And Chase Elliott, remember we talked about this in the Coca-Cola 600 last year and many other times when he'd be leading, the caution would come out and they'd pit, and they'd come back outside the top 10 and struggle to get back up to the lead. And happened again. He had to push too hard, made a couple mistakes, spun with contact with Hamlin, and he finished 21st. So, it's just I don't think the caution was needed. I would have rather almost seen a boring race and let Elliott win naturally. But then it comes to the point: does Daytona Road Course come back? To me, I don't think you need 3 races at Daytona. Does it replace the 400? Is it something different? Do you need the 400 when you have the 500? And it's just 100 miles shorter? I think the action standpoint, most fans would rather see the 400. And these drivers all said that reap what you sow with some of these road courses, and this is what you're going to get. And I just have a feeling for these other 6 road courses, are we going to see a Chase Elliott versus Gibbs show on the other 6 and make it boring? So,
and it's 3 hours, right?
Oh, yeah, 3 hours.
3 hours.
The truck race was almost, it's too long. IndyCar has, as an example, most road course races are certain laps or 2 hours. They try to fit in a 2-hour window. 3 hours for 70 laps. Just think about that. Who wants to sit in the stands and only see the cars go by them 70 times in a span of 3 hours?
And one guy's dominating.
Yeah, at least the 500 is a little over 3 hours, and you see 200 laps. This had 70. The truck race the other night had like 51, and a lot of those were overtime finishes. I even counted from lap 30 to the end, like 20 laps. They had 3 green flag laps the whole time, and it was 3 hours. So, yeah, changes are going to have to be made. You could go local yellows instead of a full course yellow. Maybe skip the chicanes on their yellow to speed the caution laps up. But, yeah, 70 laps for 2 hours, 59 minutes, and 32 seconds is just way too long.
All in all, it's only been a couple of weeks, but and look, we said this last week. It's going to take a while before we really figure out who's doing well, who's not. So it's early. What I did want to talk to you about though was the setup as far as with no practice and how they determined the results of the Daytona 500 and then the starting position of the road course race. Mm-hmm. And we know as we get later into the season, or last year when all this started, it was a little easier because we already kind of knew who it had already the season had already started. So we had an understanding already of who were the better drivers and who weren't. So if there was no practice, all right, if you weren't really that good, you were only going to drop down a certain, you'd be like 15, 16, 17, whatever.
Yeah, they tiered it. Yep.
But when you have a really bad situation in the 500, which a lot of drivers had, how is it fair to not have the practice give them an opportunity to set up their starting position better in the road course when they just, well, sorry, I don't care if you crashed early in the Daytona 500. Something happened like Ryan Blaney. Too bad. You're going to start way back in the road course, which basically means that come on, you know how hard it is to move from the back to the front in a road course. I don't want to see practice. We've talked about it, but you have to find a better way early in the season and to say, well, on a race like Daytona where mayhem just happens all the time, some driver could have absolutely, like Blaney, he got completely screwed It wasn't his fault that he got hit and knocked out. Yep. And then he winds up. That hit basically in Daytona screwed his first 2 races of the season. We'll just put it that way.
Yeah, and that's what like drivers like Christopher Bell and those guys were saying last year. And me and CJ talked about it. So I'm like, hey, Bell's better than what his results are showing.
Yes, correct.
He's stuck in middle, like 25th on in the points.
That wasn't fair either. Yes.
Yeah, and that's kind of how Blaney got suckered into. And here early in the season, it's gonna happen. Like you look like a Tyler Reddick finished 38th yesterday. He's coming from the back at Homestead now. It's gonna help us betting odds. Hint, a guy that I was talking about for Wednesday show, maybe a first-time winner, starting 38th. He's behind the 8 ball, and some of these like a road course. I'd be curious. I'll probably ask him closer to May when we get COTA next. I guess there's practice, but they're not qualifying. How the race prior to that is important for finishing the order, and fastest speed. That's another equation into this for starting spot. Because you don't want to have a bad race, the race before a road course, and start in the back. Because Blaney just showed yesterday, he was a non-factor all day. I mean, he never was a factor up front. To me, I'd rather see it maybe, can we invert it? I mean, you gave the best part of the show yesterday being a snoozer was you gave the best driver on road courses the pole. He's starting on the pole.
Yeah, come on.
It's like that's almost an unfair advantage. I mean, you gave it wouldn't have been better to watch Chase Elliott. Yeah, let's invert it. Let's see the guys put their money where their mouth is. But yeah, I think there's something to be said, and I think if I would be okay, and I don't know why. I get it because you don't want to have a backup car, but that could be strategy too. With why can't we just qualify, just a 1 lap qualify before these races? We're already there. Can't we just bring the cars out, qualify real quick, and you're gonna race what you qualify, but at least get a starting lineup.
Yeah, it's a little more fair.
Something. Yeah, because you're already there.
Yeah.
If you wreck, you wreck. That's your fault. If you wreck in qualifying, then you have to finish last. Sure. But at least maybe give some value for those fans in the stands since we're starting to open back up. Fans are starting to be more included in these races. So maybe that morning, can we give them something to watch maybe before the race? And like, hey, I know if we're going to have these East Coast 3:30 starts, can we at least have maybe a noon qualifying session? Maybe give them something to watch, get them to the track a little earlier. So, yeah, I agree. Maybe a tweak needs to be done with this qualifying.
All right, so Homestead is coming up, and anything we need to know between now and, of course, we're going to do the show on Wednesday. So we'll be able to break everything down. We'll go over fantasy. We'll go over futures. We'll go over, obviously, the Homestead race.
Yeah, I'd say just the big teaser would be you could have 3 straight first-time winners. There's a couple guys on the list to watch. Toyota has been good there in the past. And is this the spot? We've all talked about Larson at Homestead. Is this the spot that Larson finally gets his first win at Hendrick and gets back to victory lane? And he's looked decent so far. So we'll talk about some of that stuff on Wednesday.
All right. And as far as the standings, again, don't want to get too much into it. But, Di Benedetto is off to a slow start. You mentioned Reddick. Some of the more known drivers, even Blaney, though he's off to a slow start, is still 19th. Kyle's now 17th. Those are probably the 2 biggest names who are right now on the outside of the playoff cutoff line. But that doesn't really matter. Just shows
it's early. You got Almirola back there too. How about Ryan Newman being behind Austin Cindric in the points, and Cindric only ran 1 race?
Yeah, that's not good.
Chase Briscoe 31st. William Byron 35th in the standings. But again, it's early. They've got time to come back.
All right, Eric. What are you going to be working on this week, and what have you already worked on?
Yeah, we'll have the burning questions, the pre-race previews, like with the track trends, what to compare it to, and some favorites and sleepers to watch before the weekend.
Excellent, Eric. Appreciate it. Look forward to talking to you and CJ as we preview Homestead on Wednesday.
Awesome. Thank you. Talk to you then.